A photograph on a mantel. A woman standing in front of an ordinary house in an ordinary cotton dress. And something about the way she's standing stops you. She owns 6 dresses. She looks like she owns 60. You may have a closet you can barely close and still stand in front of it every morning with nothing to wear. That gap isn't about money. She had less than most people and looked like more because she knew something you were never taught. Rules her mother handed her, and her mother's mother before that, so ordinary she never thought to name them. Then the industry arrived. The rules were replaced with products, and the products with more products, and 100 years of knowing exactly what to wear went quiet, one closet at a time. So I gathered my best videos on 1950s Black women style tricks and put them all in one video. Settle in, grab some popcorn, and let's begin. Look at any photograph from 1955. A church in Jackson on a Sunday morning. A block association meeting in Baltimore in October. A neighborhood cookout in Detroit in July with folding tables and potato salad and children running through somebody's backyard. Look at the women. Not at their faces, at the details, the hem that hangs even, the collar that sits flat, the shoes that have been polished, the blouse that is pressed. None of these women look like they tried very hard. Not one of them looks messy. That is not an accident, and it is not a coincidence. It is also not the story that gets told. The story that gets told about Black women's appearance in America in the 1950s is usually the story of constraint, of what they were denied access to, of which department stores would not let them use the fitting rooms, of which beauty counters would not serve them. Those stories are true. The constraint was real, but that is only half the picture. Because what those women did inside that constraint, the precision they developed, the knowledge they built, the results they produced with almost nothing, is a story that belongs to them and that the beauty and fashion industry has spent decades trying to make them forget. The women in those photographs look like that because they knew things their mothers gave them, things that traveled person to person, in kitchens and on porches and in beauty parlors on Saturday afternoons. The way the important knowledge always traveled in communities where the official channels were closed. This is the knowledge. Before number 10, subscribe. This is exactly what this channel is here to make. Hit that button. Then let's go. Number 10, she never left the house without checking the back. Before she walked out the door in 1955, she turned around, not to look at her face a second time, to look at the back, the hem at the back, the collar lying flat at the back, the seam of the stocking running straight up the back of the calf. For a Black woman in 1955 America, this check was not optional. She understood something the broader culture is only beginning to name, that she would be assessed more quickly, more harshly, and at higher standards than the women around her. A hem that dipped, a collar that rode up, a blouse that came untucked. These details that a white woman might carry through a public space without consequence were details that would be used to confirm a story about her that she had not written and did not agree to. She turned around every morning because her mother had shown her what she looked like from behind the one time she hadn't checked, and she had not needed to be shown twice. Because the back of a woman is what the room sees after she has entered it. Because the front gets assessed at the door, but the back stays in the room's field of vision for everything that follows. This costs nothing, takes 8 seconds, has no product associated with it. It was simply a standard she held herself to before the world got a chance to hold it for her. Number 9. She dressed for where she was going before she left, not when she arrived. In 1956, there was a dress for church, a dress for the market, a dress for the beauty parlor, a dress for the house. These categories were not about multiple wardrobes. They were about dressing for the occasion before you entered it, not casually, not approximately, exactly. You knew where you were going. You dressed accordingly. This was not merely a style decision. For Black women navigating segregated spaces, occasion-appropriate dressing was also a form of communication. A Black woman who appeared in a professional space looking precisely dressed for it was harder to dismiss. A Black woman who appeared at a civic meeting, a school meeting dressed exactly as the occasion required, was making a claim with her appearance before she made any claim with her words. This was understood. This was taught. The progressive blurring of occasion dressing, from athleisure at dinner to casual at the office, did not arrive because women stopped caring. It arrived because an industry discovered that blurring occasions multiplied the categories of clothing a person felt she needed to own. She always knew what to wear, not because she had more choices, because she had fewer and she understood each one completely. Number 8, shoes were polished and heels were sound before the week began. Sunday evening, the shoes came out. Every pair that would be worn that week. Polish applied, buffed, set to dry. The heels were examined, and if the heel cap had worn through, the shoes went to the cobbler before the week started, not after the heel gave out in the street. A scuffed shoe was not a small thing. It was a vulnerability. A Black woman who appeared in a white-owned office or a school board meeting with a scuffed shoe had given the room a detail to diminish her with. She understood this with a precision that the broader culture did not have to develop because it did not face the same stakes. The polished shoe said, "I missed nothing. You will have to find something else." The Black cobbler shops that populated every Black urban neighborhood in the 1950s were maintenance infrastructure for women who could not afford to let a visible detail slide. She had one pair of good shoes and a cobbler 2 blocks away. Her shoes always looked right. Number 7, the foundation went on before the dress. Every time, without exception. Before anything went on in 1955, something went under. A structured brassiere, a light girdle, a slip that gave the outer garment a surface to work with. Not because she was suffering for fashion, because she understood that the outer garment is not designed to go directly onto an unprepared body. It is designed to go over a prepared surface. When the foundation is doing its job, the dress reads as it was designed to read. When it is not, the dress is working against physics. It was not designed to fight. For Black women who made their own clothes, and many of them did, because the department stores that carried ready-to-wear either would not serve them or did not stock cuts for their bodies, the foundation was especially critical. A dress made at home, cut carefully for a specific figure, set over the right undergarments, was indistinguishable from something bought at full price at a store that would not have admitted her through the front door. This was understood. This was the point. The shapewear industry is now worth billions of dollars a year. It sells back to women what they were already doing for nothing. The knowledge had not disappeared. The habit had. Before number 6, subscribe if you have not already. This channel goes where the history actually is. The button is right there. Number 6, she pressed everything before it went on her body. Every week, without exception. Sunday evening, after the supper dishes were done, the ironing board came out. Every blouse, every skirt, every dress that would leave the house that week went flat under the iron. The kitchen smelled like warm cotton. The finished pile grew on the chair beside the board, Tuesday's blouse lying over Thursday's skirt, until the week was accounted for. 45 minutes. The week organized. For Black women in 1955, the press garment was not just aesthetics. It was argument. The civil rights movement understood this explicitly. The women who marched, who sat in, who stood their ground at lunch counters and school board meetings wore their finest, most carefully pressed clothing deliberately. They understood that the dignity communicated through a pressed garment was one of the few forms of argument that could not be interrupted. You could refuse to hear a woman speak. You could not refuse to see that she had taken the time. The ironed garment was her evidence. This is who I am. This is what I think of this occasion. This is the standard I hold before you hold any standard for me. Permanent press fabric arrived in the 1960s and made the iron optional. It quietly removed the visible difference between a woman who cared for her clothes and one who didn't. The ironed blouse and the permanent press blouse look different in the same room. The ironed one looks chosen. She pressed everything because her mother pressed everything, and because the alternative communicated something she had no intention of communicating. Number 5, she owned fewer pieces and wore each one until she knew it completely. In 1957, she owned 6 dresses. Every piece had been worn many times. Every piece had been confirmed as working. There were no pieces bought in a rush and worn once and pushed to the back. The wardrobe was a closed system. She knew exactly what she had and exactly how to use it. The average American woman today owns between 60 and 80 pieces of clothing and still reports having nothing to wear. Fast fashion is built entirely on the anxiety it creates, the feeling that what you have is never quite current, never quite right. She never felt that way about her 6 dresses. She had worn them all before. She knew what each one needed and what each one gave back. Many of these women could not browse freely in the stores where clothes were sold. Many were served last or not at all, sent measurements by mail, or bought on approval from catalogs. Every piece they owned had been acquired with effort. Nothing had been bought casually. That effort produced a relationship with each garment that fast fashion was specifically designed to end. Because a woman who knows every piece she owns has no use for this week's trend. Number 4, she never wore anything that didn't fit. If it didn't fit, she fixed it before she put it on. She took things to the seamstress on the block, or she altered them herself. Because many Black women of that era had to learn to sew to access clothes that fit bodies the ready-to-wear industry was not cutting for. A hem too long got shortened, a waist too wide got taken in. Every piece performed exactly as designed because each had been altered to work for her body specifically. A garment that fits reads as expensive regardless of what it cost. A garment that doesn't fit reads as careless regardless of what it cost. This is the most cost-free form of looking put together available, requiring no product, only the knowledge of what fits, and the willingness to fix what doesn't before wearing it. The seamstress on the block in Black neighborhoods of the 1950s was not a luxury. She was infrastructure, the mechanism by which women excluded from full-price fitting rooms still appeared in public looking precisely dressed. Number 3, she kept her accessories coordinated and used them as the variable. The handbag matched the shoes, the scarf finished the coat, the gloves came off only indoors. This was not a restriction. It was mathematics. A woman who owned 6 dresses and rotated her accessories deliberately looked like she owned 20. The accessories were the variable in an equation where the dresses were the constants. Change the scarf, the brooch, the belt against the same dress, and the dress disappears. What the room sees is a completely different combination. This mathematics was especially important for Black women building wardrobes under economic constraints that left no room for waste, who needed every piece to work as hard as possible. The accessory strategy was resource management applied to appearance. The result, the impression of abundance from a small, precisely coordinated wardrobe, was identical to what far wealthier women were producing at 10 times the cost. The global handbag market alone is now worth over $50 billion a year. Most of what gets purchased are individual pieces that don't coordinate with anything already owned, bought in isolation, unable to do the mathematical work she was doing for almost nothing. Number 2, she walked like the outfit was already finished. In a kitchen somewhere in the South in the early 1950s, a mother showed her daughter a demonstration. She stood up straight, chin parallel to the floor, shoulders settled back, weight centered, movement from the hips. Then she let her shoulders drop forward, her chin fall, her spine curve. Same woman, same dress. She said, "Look at what the dress does." The dress did nothing in the second position. It bunched at the shoulder. The hem pulled. What had looked like a well-made garment looked like something grabbed in a hurry. For Black women in 1955 America, posture was not a style technique. It was a political act. During the Civil Rights era, the instruction to demonstrators was explicit and deliberate. Dress your finest, stand straight, move with dignity, give them nothing. The women who marched and sat in and stood at lunch counters understood that their bearing was part of their argument, that a woman who moved through a hostile space with her weight centered and her head up was making a claim about herself that the space was trying to deny. The dress performed because the body performing it had already decided who it was. She stood straight for 60 years. She never thought of it as style advice. She thought of it as what her mother showed her in the kitchen. Number 1, she knew what suited her and bought only that, and she never needed to think about it again. This is the rule that made every other rule work. This is why the wardrobe was a closed system. This is why the accessories coordinated. This is why she could get dressed in 7 minutes and leave the house looking precisely right every single time. She had been taught at some point before she was 20 by her mother or her mother's seamstress or the women at church or the older women at the beauty parlor who talked about these things with the seriousness they deserved, to look at a garment the way a craftsman looks at a tool. Not with the question of whether it is fashionable, but with the question of whether it is right for her. Not that color, it takes something from your face. That one, it brings something forward. The A line, not the pencil. The fitted waist, not the drop. The round collar, not the V. She could walk through a shop in 15 minutes and know precisely what was hers and what was not. For Black women who could not walk freely through all the shops, who were assessed at the door before they touched a single garment on a rack, who had to know before they went in what they were looking for. Because there might not be a second trip, this knowledge was not a style preference. It was a condition of operating efficiently in a world that offered limited access and no tolerance for mistakes. She could not afford to buy the wrong thing. So she had made sure, well before she went looking, that she knew exactly what the right thing was. The fashion industry requires the opposite of this knowledge. Trends must apply universally. Personalized knowledge about what suits a specific body is a direct threat to volume, because a woman who knows what suits her and buys only that has no use for a trend that does not. The uncertainty was designed. The most put together woman in any photograph from 1955 is not the one who spent the most. She is the one who knew. These rules cost nothing. They required no subscription, no product, no belief that the problem was her body. They required knowing what she knew, knowledge not given to her by any industry, but passed person to person, generation to generation. Through the hands of women who understood that looking right was never just about how you looked. Pick one rule from this list. Start this week. Come back in the comments and tell me what changed. The next video is ready. Her name was Dorothy. In 1957, she left her house in Birmingham on a Sunday morning in a dress she had made herself. A fitted bodice, a full skirt that landed just below the knee, a fabric she had bought for 60 cents a yard from the dry goods store on 4th Avenue. She had cut the pattern herself. She had taken in the waist by hand. She had pressed it the night before on an ironing board in the kitchen while her children slept. She stepped out of that house, and she looked like a woman who had spent $100 she did not have. She had spent 60 cents in 4 hours. The women on Dorothy's block could not walk into the department stores downtown. Not the main floor, not the fitting rooms. The signs were clear, and the rules were enforced, and the racks of clothing inside were not for them. What they had instead was each other. Neighborhood seamstresses shared patterns, inherited knowledge about fabric and fit, and what a woman's body actually needed from a garment. They had been sewing their own clothes for so long that by the time the department stores let them in, most of them had already outgrown the need. The style you see in photographs of Black women from that era, the tailored waists, the deliberate hats, the gloves, the pressed everything, did not come from money. It came from something the fashion industry has never been able to bottle or sell because it cannot be manufactured. It came from knowing exactly what you were doing and why. Before number 7, subscribe. This is exactly what this channel is here to make. Hit that button, then let's go. Number 7, she made it herself and it fit. The single most important reason Black women in the 1950s always look put together is a reason the fashion industry will never advertise. The clothes fit, not because they could afford tailoring, because they did the tailoring. Sewing was not a hobby in Dorothy's house. It was infrastructure. Home economics classes in Black schools taught dressmaking as a core skill. Butterick and simplicity patterns were passed between neighbors and between generations, annotated in pen with adjustments for different bodies, different heights, different waists. A pattern Aunt Ida had altered in 1949 could still be found in someone's sewing box in 1961 with 3 generations of pencil marks across it. Zelda Wynne Valdez, the Black designer who dressed Eartha Kitt and Dorothy Dandridge, the woman who popularized the curve-hugging silhouette that became synonymous with 1950s glamour, was known in her shop for tailoring a dress to any body type, often without taking measurements. She had learned the skill by watching her grandmother's seamstress. She built a career from it. The women in Dorothy's neighborhood built a wardrobe from it. A dress that fits the body it belongs to will always look more expensive than a dress that doesn't. The entire fast fashion industry is built on the opposite principle. Clothes cut for a hypothetical average that fits no one exactly, sold at speed and volume to women who buy more to compensate for the fact that nothing quite works. The global fast fashion industry is now worth over $100 billion a year. Dorothy's needle and thread cost 30 cents and produced a garment that fit her body precisely because she had built it for her body specifically. Number 6, the hat was not a decoration. It was the whole outfit. Dorothy did not leave the house for church without a hat. Neither did anyone else on her block. The hat was not an accessory in the way the word accessory means something optional. It was the completing element without which the outfit was unfinished, the way a sentence without a period is unfinished. The Black church hat tradition runs deeper than fashion. During slavery and Jim Crow, Black women were restricted from wearing hats in many public spaces, a hat being considered a symbol of status that was not meant for them. Wearing a hat to church was, among other things, a refusal of that restriction. By the 1950s, it had become a non-negotiable element of Sunday dress, and the care that went into choosing it, the angle, the color, The relationship between the hat and the dress and the gloves was a studied practice passed down alongside every other piece of domestic knowledge. The skill was architectural. A wide brim draws the eye upward and lengthens the silhouette. A pillbox worn forward closes the face and creates drama. A hat in the same family as the dress color unifies the look and signals intention. A hat, in contrast, creates visual interest and makes a simple dress memorable. Dorothy knew all of this, not because she had read it, but because she had watched it done her entire life. The global hat and millinery market is now worth over $8 billion a year. Most of that market is occasion hats. Items bought for weddings and special events and worn once. Dorothy wore hers every week. She knew how to wear it. That knowledge is the thing that cannot be purchased. And it is the thing the market replaced with a product while leaving the knowledge behind. Number 5, she ironed everything, every single thing. Friday evening in Dorothy's house meant the ironing board. Every piece of clothing that would be worn the following week was pressed flat before it went on the body that wore it. Not just church clothes, work clothes, everyday clothes. The children's school clothes laid out the night before, creased and smooth and ready. An ironed garment occupies space differently than an unironed one. It holds its shape. The collar lies flat. The seams are visible. The fabric does what it was designed to do rather than what gravity and a drawer have done to it. A 40-cent cotton dress, pressed in sharp, reads at a distance as something that costs 5 times as much. This is not a small thing. This is most of the thing. Dorothy did not press her clothes to impress anyone. She pressed them because her mother pressed them, and because stepping out of the house in wrinkled clothing was not something a woman of self-respect did. The standard was internal. It was not performed for an audience. It was just what you did before you left the house, the same way you washed your face. The global garment steamer and iron market is now worth over $5 billion a year. The knowledge of what to do with those tools, which fabrics take heat, which need steam, how to press a collar, how to crease a sleeve, has largely been lost in the generation that replaced the ironing board with permanent press and synthetic fabric. Dorothy had the tools for 50 cents. What she had that cost nothing was the discipline to use them. Before number 4, subscribe if you haven't already. This channel exists to recover exactly this kind of knowledge. The button is right there. Number 4, she dressed for her body, not the trend. Dorothy had been told by the neighborhood seamstress when she was 19 what worked on her frame. A fitted waist, an A-line skirt, nothing boxy across the shoulder. She had been listening to this information her entire adult life, and she had never bought anything that contradicted it. This was not unique to Dorothy. It was a feature of how women in her community approached clothes. The seamstress was not just a person who stitched fabric. She was a diagnostician. She walked around a woman and told her the truth about what her body needed from clothing, which lines elongated, which compressed, which emphasized what should be emphasized and minimized what was better quiet. That knowledge traveled from the seamstress to the customer to the daughter. It was not written down because it did not need to be written down. Everyone passed it person to person. The fashion industry requires the opposite of this knowledge to function. Trends must apply to everyone. This season's silhouette must be the one every woman wants. Personalized knowledge about what suits a specific body is a direct threat to volume, and volume is the business. If every woman knows exactly what works on her body and buys only that, the replacement cycle breaks. The industry needs uncertainty. Uncertainty is expensive. It was designed to be. Dorothy was never uncertain. She had been told the truth about her body at 19, and she had trusted that truth for the rest of her life. She never bought the wrong dress because she had never walked into a store or stood at her cutting table asking the wrong question. She wasn't asking what was fashionable. She was asking what was hers. Number 3. Accessories were the entire strategy. Dorothy owned 6 dresses, maybe 7 in a good year. What she owned more of were the things that could make those 6 dresses look like 20. Gloves, scarves, 2 pairs of good shoes in neutral colors that worked across everything. A brooch her mother had given her that went on the lapel, the collar, or the belt depending on the day. A structured handbag that matched the darker of the 2 pairs of shoes. This was not poverty dressed up as philosophy. It was mathematics. A woman who rotates her accessories deliberately against a small wardrobe creates the impression of a wardrobe 3 times its actual size because the eye registers the combination, not the individual piece. The dress is a constant. The scarf changes it. The hat changes it again. The brooch moves to a different position, and the whole outfit reads as new. The global accessories market is now worth over $500 billion a year. Handbags, scarves, jewelry, belts, shoes sold as single pieces, replaced seasonally, accumulated into closets where nothing coordinates with anything else because nothing was bought with the whole in mind. Dorothy's accessories work together because she bought each one with everything else she owned already in her head. Every piece had to earn its place by working with what already existed. Nothing came in that didn't increase the combinations available from what was already there. The industry does not want you to think in combinations. The industry wants you to think in individual pieces, each one complete in itself, each one requiring its own replacement. Dorothy was thinking in systems. The industry was not built to survive that. Number 2, she pressed her appearance in public as hard as she pressed her clothes at home. Walk, shoulders back, chin parallel to the floor. The skirt hangs even when the posture holds the body correctly. The collar sits flat. The silhouette the dress was designed to produce is the silhouette the body actually produces when it moves through the room, the way the dress expects it to. Dorothy's mother had shown her this the same way Dorothy's grandmother had shown it before that. Not as a beauty tip, as a standard. You did not walk into a room with your shoulders collapsed or your eyes down. Not in that era. Not in that community. In a world that was working constantly to communicate that Black women were worth less, the way you carried yourself in public was part of the answer you gave to that claim. During the Civil Rights era, the Sunday best tradition became an explicit political act. The women who marched and sat in and stood their ground wore their finest clothing deliberately. Pressed dresses, good shoes, hats, and gloves, because they understood that the dignity they claimed through their appearance was itself an argument. There was no formal dress code. The dress code was the culture passed down through every woman on every block who understood that how you present yourself in a world that tries to diminish you is never a trivial matter. Dorothy walked like it mattered because it did. Number 1, she understood that looking elegant was not about what she had. It was about what she knew. This is the one the fashion industry cannot sell you. Dorothy could walk into any fabric store and come out with 60 cents worth of material and produce a garment that would make people ask who made it. She could take a dress she had worn for 3 years and move a button and change the silhouette and wear it somewhere new. She could coordinate a hat she had worn 15 times with a scarf she had inherited and look like something that had been planned by a stylist. None of this was available for purchase. Not the pattern recognition. Not the eye for fit. Not the knowledge of what her body needed and what it didn't. Not the understanding of proportion and color and occasion that meant she was never over or underdressed, because she knew, before she left the house, exactly where she was going and what that place required of her. The fashion industry grew by replacing knowledge with product. Once a woman knows what works on her body, she stops buying what doesn't. Once she can sew, she stops buying things that don't fit. Once she understands accessories as a system, she stops buying individual pieces that don't connect to anything else. The entire growth model of the fashion industry depended on removing this knowledge from circulation. It succeeded. Not entirely, not in every household, but enough. The seamstress on Dorothy's block retired in 1972. The sewing machine that had sat in the corner of her front room went to a granddaughter who used it occasionally, and then moved it to a closet in 1985. The patterns with the pencil adjustments were lost in a move sometime in the early 1990s. Dorothy's daughter shops online. She fills a cart, returns 60% of it, and keeps the pieces that almost fit. She has more clothes in her wardrobe than her mother owned in her lifetime. She stands in front of them on Sunday mornings and feels like she has nothing to wear. Dorothy would have found this confusing. Pick one thing from this list. Start with the iron. Come back in the comments and tell me what changed. The next video is ready. There is a photograph of your grandmother from 1957. She is standing in front of a house in Birmingham or Baltimore or on a block in Chicago's South Side, probably not a big house, wearing a dress you would wear today if you could find it. She looks put together in a way that stops you when you study it. You try to identify what it is. It is not the dress. The dress is ordinary cotton. The dress is doing nothing special on its own. It is what is underneath the dress, not in the way that phrase usually gets used, not as suggestion or implication, literally underneath. The structure underneath. The shape built before the fabric was put on. The layers doing specific jobs that the dress could not do without them. Jobs that a woman in 1957 would not have needed to explain to anyone, because every woman around her understood them, had been fitted for them, had worn them since adolescence, and took for granted that a dress required a foundation the way a house requires a frame. And for Black women navigating a world that assessed them more quickly and more harshly than anyone else in the room. The foundation system was not optional. It was armor. The difference between a garment that fell correctly and one that didn't was the difference between being taken seriously and being dismissed before she opened her mouth. She dressed accordingly. She always had. Then the industry changed. Convenience arrived first, comfort arrived second. And then a generation grew up without the knowledge that the foundation existed at all. And they spent their lives wondering why the dresses never looked like the photographs from 1957. This is what was underneath the dress. Before number 8, subscribe. This is exactly what this channel is here to recover. Hit that button. Then let's go. Number 8. The brassiere was fitted, not purchased off a rack in a guest size. In 1955, a woman who needed a brassiere went to a department store where a fitter, a specific person with training in measuring and fitting, assessed her correctly and selected the right garment from a structured inventory. This fitting was not a courtesy service. It was the purchase process. You did not take a size off a rack and guess in a dressing room. A professional walked around you, took measurements, and brought you what you needed. For Black women, this access was not always straightforward. In segregated cities, the fitting rooms of white-owned department stores were frequently off limits. Many Black women were fitted at Black-owned dry goods stores and boutiques, by seamstresses in the neighborhood who had learned fitting as part of their trade, or by older women in the family who had learned it the same way. The knowledge traveled through those channels instead, and it traveled with precision. Because a Black woman who left the house with a poorly fitted brassiere under a fitted dress was not just uncomfortable. She was giving a white world one more thing to notice. The reason fitting mattered in terms of how a dress looked is specific and mechanical. A brassiere that does not fit correctly does not lift the bust to the position for which the dress was designed. Ready-to-wear dresses in the 1950s were cut with the assumption that the wearer's bust was positioned at a particular point on the torso. The point a correctly fitted, structured brassiere of that era produced. A dress fitted to that assumption reads completely differently on a body where that positioning has not been created. Studies by the University of Portsmouth in the early 2000s found that over 80% of women are wearing the wrong bra size. That number was not true in 1955. It became true gradually as professional fitting services disappeared, as women began selecting sizes off racks, and as the connection between the undergarment and the final silhouette was severed from the knowledge base entirely. The global bra market is now worth over $45 billion a year. The majority of those purchases are the wrong size. In 1955, in households where the fitting knowledge had been passed correctly, that was not possible. Number 7. The girdle was not punishment. It was engineering. The word girdle has accumulated approximately 70 years of negative cultural meaning, all of which obscures what it actually was and what it actually did. A light girdle, not the heavy rubber garments of earlier decades, but the lighter elasticized foundations of the mid-1950s, did two specific jobs simultaneously that no other garment has since replaced. First, it smoothed the line from the waist to the upper thigh, eliminating the variation in silhouette that shifting undergarments create as a woman moves. Second, and more importantly for how a dress reads from the outside, it provided the surface tension that kept the outer garment hanging from the body correctly as the body moved. Without that surface tension, fabric bunches, pulls, and redistributes itself in ways that interrupt the line the dress was designed to produce. With it, the dress moves with the body as a single, consistent shape. In Black households, the light girdle was part of Sunday morning preparation the same way the pressed dress and the set hair were. You put them on because you were going somewhere that mattered. And going somewhere that mattered meant the whole system, not just the outer layer. A church mother in her fitted dress and her properly anchored skirt communicating effortless composure. That was not an accident of good genes. That was infrastructure doing its job invisibly. The shapewear industry is now worth over $5 billion globally. It sells at $20 to $60 a unit what the light girdle of 1955 was doing for under 10. The market exists because the knowledge that something structural was needed did not disappear. It just became a premium product rather than a standard practice. Number 6. The slip was doing 3 jobs, not 1. A slip in 1955 was not a decorative underlayer or a modesty garment. It was performing 3 simultaneous mechanical functions that together determined whether the dress above it looked as designed. The first function was friction reduction. Dress fabric moving directly against hosiery or bare skin creates drag that distorts the drape of the outer layer. A slip eliminates the friction point, allowing the dress to fall and move freely. This is why a dress over a slip swings and settles differently than a dress worn without one. The fabric is not fighting resistance at every point of contact with the body. It is moving against a smooth, consistent surface. The second function was silhouette refinement. The slip sat between the foundation garments and the outer dress, smoothing any irregularities in the surface those garments created and providing a clean, consistent surface for the outer fabric to rest against. A girdle or brassiere, however well fitted, creates its own textures and edges. The slip absorbed those irregularities before they could read through to the outside. The third function was temperature regulation. The slip kept the body insulated enough that the outer layer was not pulled against the skin by static or warmth, which allows the dress to maintain the small amount of separation from the body that its drape requires. In southern cities where summer heat was not a secondary concern, a good slip was also what kept a woman looking composed at noon in July, when the air had turned thick. The fashion industry stopped building slips into garments when synthetic linings became standard in the 1970s. What it replaced was not the slip itself, but the understanding of why the slip was there. A synthetic lining addresses the friction problem. It does not address the silhouette refinement or the temperature effect. The result is that line garments still move differently on the body than a full foundation system produced. Less so, but measurably. The underwear category collectively is worth over $200 billion globally. The slip has almost entirely disappeared from the market. What disappeared with it is the understanding that it was not underwear in the modern sense. It was architecture. Before number 5, I want you to have all of this in one place. Every beauty ritual, every health practice, every style standard, every piece of forgotten wisdom from the 1950s and 1960s that I have recovered on this channel is documented in the description below. Number 5. Stockings with seams required posture, and posture required stockings with seams. In 1957, full-fashion nylon stockings with a back seam were the standard for dressed occasions. They were not cheap. A good pair cost between $1 and $2, which at that era's wage rates was a meaningful expenditure for a black household operating on wages that were systematically lower than those of white workers doing the same jobs. You did not mistreat them. You washed them by hand. You rolled them carefully. You put them on with intention. The seam ran straight up the back of the leg only if the stocking was put on correctly, if the garter holding it was properly attached, and if the wearer was standing correctly. A woman walking with her weight unevenly distributed, or with her hips misaligned, or with her spine curved forward, produced a seam that twisted or wandered. The seam was a visible indicator of how a woman was carrying herself. The result was that stockings with back seams made posture a practical daily consideration. A crooked seam was visible to everyone behind you, which meant the correction was immediate and constant. This is one of the mechanisms by which the physical carriage of women in 1957 was structurally different from the carriage of women today. Not because they were trying harder, but because the feedback system was more immediate. The garment was doing the reminding. The global hosiery market is now worth over $40 billion a year. The back seam stocking is a niche product. The posture feedback mechanism it created has no modern equivalent. Number 4. The garter belt was the system that held the whole architecture together. The garter belt in 1955 was not a novelty item. It was infrastructure. It attached to the girdle or was worn as a standalone belt with specific clip-style garters that held the stocking taut from the thigh, preventing the bunching, slipping. And rolling that produced visible lines under a fitted dress. The combination of girdle or garter belt, correctly fitted stockings, and the seam running straight produced the smooth, uninterrupted line from waist to ankle that is visible in every photograph of well-dressed black women from this era. Photographs that are now collected and shared and studied precisely because something in them is no longer replicable without understanding what produced it. Pantyhose arrived in 1959 and became commercially widespread through the 1960s. They were a convenience product, marketed as such. One garment instead of several, no garters required, no seam to manage. What they replaced was not simply a more complicated version of the same function. They replaced the tension system that the garter and stocking combination produced, which was specifically calibrated to hold without compressing. Pantyhose compress uniformly. The garter system holds without compressing, which is why photographs of legs in stockings and garters look different from photographs of legs in pantyhose. The fabric sits against the leg differently because the tension mechanism is different. The legwear market globally is now over $30 billion. The garter system is sold primarily as lingerie rather than foundation wear. What was lost is not the garment, but the functional understanding of why it worked. Number 3. Foundation garments were fitted seasonally, not purchased once and forgotten. A woman in 1955 who took her foundation system seriously was refitted at the beginning of each season, or whenever her body changed, or when the garment she was wearing showed wear. In Black communities where access to formal department store fitting services was restricted, this refitting happened through the seamstress on the block. Through the older women in the family who had been doing this their whole lives, through the kind of peer assessment that happened at church when one woman looked at another's silhouette and said quietly, "That girdle has stretched out." A brassiere that has stretched from washing fits differently than it did new. A girdle that has lost elasticity is no longer performing its structural function. The adjustment cycle was continuous. Because the body is continuous, it changes, and the foundation system had to change with it. What replaced the seasonal fitting was mass market sizing that made a woman's size a fixed number she carried with her rather than a relationship between her body and the garment being put onto it. The consequence is that most women today are wearing foundation garments adjusted to a body they no longer precisely have. The silhouette those garments produce is therefore never quite what the garment was designed to produce. The difference is small on any given day. Across the photographs of any given decade, it becomes visible. Number 2. Color and material were chosen for the outer garment, not for personal preference. The slip that went under a white dress was not white. It was the closest match to the wearer's skin tone available, which for Black women in 1955 meant navigating a lingerie market that produced nude in a single shade that matched nothing about their skin. Many Black women dyed their slips, bought them in ivory or camel tones that came closer, or had them made. The point was function. No shadow from the underlayer should alter the color the outer fabric produced in light. This was not a small consideration. A white dress over a white slip on a deep brown skin reads differently than a white dress over a slip that disappears. The women who understood this solved the problem with whatever was available. Dye. A different fabric. A seamstress who understood what was needed. The knowledge that the solution was required came before the formal product to provide it. The brassiere under a thin fabric was smooth cupped rather than lace detailed, because lace creates a texture that reads through sheer or lightweight woven fabrics. These choices were engineering decisions, made with the understanding that the outer garment could only perform as designed if the layers underneath were not interfering with it. The lingerie market now produces products specifically designed for a range of skin tones, marketed as an inclusion development. What those products are doing is solving the problem Black women had already been solving for themselves for decades, using dye and resourcefulness and the knowledge that the underlayer's job was to disappear. Number 1, the whole system was invisible by design, and invisibility was the point. The brassiere lifted and positioned correctly. The girdle smoothed and held tension so the dress moved as one piece with the body. The slip eliminated friction and provided the surface the dress needed to drape correctly. The stockings ran straight from garter to toe, creating the uninterrupted line the eye followed. The color of every underlayer was chosen so that it disappeared beneath what was on top. None of it was visible. All of it was determining what was visible. For Black women in 1957, this invisibility carried a specific meaning that went beyond aesthetics. The foundation system produced a result. A woman who looked impeccably assembled, who moved through space with composure, whose dress held its line whether she was walking into a church, a workplace, or a white-owned establishment that would have preferred she not be there at all, that communicated something the room could not easily dismiss. You studied the dress and called it the dress. You noticed the carriage and called it natural. You could not locate the source of what you were seeing because the source was hidden. That was the point. The knowledge was invisible. The result was not. These photographs, the ones you cannot stop looking at, are the evidence. The system that produced them is still teachable. Every garment is still available. The seamstress may not be on the corner anymore, but the knowledge she held is here. Pick one thing from this list. Start this week. Come back in the comments and tell me what changed. The next video is ready.
Her name was Viola. In 1954, she walked into a job interview in Chicago in a dress she had altered 3 times.
shoes she had resoled once, and a hat she had rebanded with a new ribbon that morning. The woman at the desk looked her up and down and asked where she had bought her suit. Viola was not wearing a suit. She was wearing a fitted dress with a structured collar she had stiffened with a piece of cotton, interfacing cut from an old pillowcase. It read as a suit from across a desk. That was the intention. She got the job. The women in Viola's community operated inside a set of rules so precise and so effective that the results looked effortless. They were not effortless. They were studied. They were passed mother to daughter, neighbor to neighbor, seamstress to customer. In the same way recipes were passed, without being written down, without being named, without anyone thinking they were doing anything unusual because everyone around them was doing the same thing. What follows is 25 of those rules, not the philosophy, the actual tricks, the specific things they knew that nobody is teaching anymore. Before number 25, subscribe. This channel exists to recover exactly this. Hit that button, then let's go. Number 25, starch was not optional. A limp collar is a finished outfit that hasn't been finished. Viola kept a spray bottle of liquid starch at the ironing board. Collars, cuffs, and the front placket of every blouse went stiff before they went on her body. It cost pennies. It read as expensive. Number 24, never buy a color you cannot already see in your wardrobe. Before anything new came into the house, it had to match something already there, not approximately. Actually, Viola carried a swatch of her main pieces in her purse. Small squares of fabric cut from seam allowances, tucked to an envelope. When she shopped, she held the new piece against the swatch. If it didn't work, she left it. Number 23. The hem told people everything. A hem that hit at the narrowest point of the calf lengthened the leg. A hem that hit at the widest point of the calf shortened it. Every woman in Viola's circle knew this. The seamstress adjusted the hem based on the leg, not the pattern. A ½ inch could change everything. Number 22. White gloves once a week kept the hands looking like they matched the outfit. Viola wore gloves to church every Sunday. Not because it was required, because bare hands in that era communicated something different than gloved hands, and she was deliberate about what she communicated. The gloves came off indoors. They went back on before she left. Number 21. A brooch moved 3 times is 3 outfits. The same brooch worn at the collar, at the waist on a belt, and at the shoulder of a coat was 3 different looks from one $2 piece. Viola owned 4 brooches. She never felt limited by 4. Number 20. The undergarment built the dress. In 1954, you did not put a dress on an unsupported body and hope for the best. A structured bra, a light girdle, and a slip were what the dress was designed to go over. The slip prevented the fabric from clinging and gave the skirt the movement it needed to fall correctly. The underpinnings were the foundation. The dress was the finished coat. Number 19. 2 neutral shoes covered the entire wardrobe. Black and a warm tan. That was it. Every dress Viola owned was chosen with those 2 shoes already in mind. Nothing came into the wardrobe that didn't work with at least one of them. The shoes were resoled when they wore through. They were not replaced because the season changed. Number 18. A scarf tied at the neck finished what the collar started. A silk scarf, or a rayon scarf that looked like silk, tied low at the throat, added color at the face without buying a new blouse. Viola had 7 scarves. Combined with 7 blouses, the mathematics gave her 49 combinations. She did not own 49 blouses. Number 17. Press the seams open and the dress reads as tailored. A home-sewn dress with pressed open seams lying flat looks professionally made. A home-sewn dress with rolled seams that haven't been pressed looks home-sewn. The iron was the difference between the two. Viola spent as much time at the ironing board after she sewed as she did at the sewing machine while she sewed. Number 16. The waist was the anchor. Everything was fitted to the waist first and built out from there. If the waist was right, the eye read the whole garment as right. If the waist was wrong, nothing above or below it could save it. Viola took in every waist on every piece she owned, commercial or homemade, until the fit was exact. Before number 15, if this is the kind of video that belongs on your feed, subscribe now. This channel goes where the history actually is. Number 15. Lint was personal. Before Viola left the house, she ran a damp cloth across every visible surface of her outfit. Not a lint roller. Those barely existed. A damp cloth, pressed once in each direction. Lint and stray threads on dark fabric communicated carelessness. She was not careless. Number 14. The collar was the frame of the face. In 1954, the collar was understood as the most important design element of any blouse or dress because it was the first thing the eye saw. A wide, flat Peter Pan collar opened the chest and drew the eye upward. A pointed collar created formality and length. Viola chose her necklines based on what she wanted the eye to do, not what was on the rack. Number 13. Dark colors anchored, light colors expanded. Dark on the bottom, light on the top made a woman look taller and longer. Light on the bottom, dark on the top reversed the effect. Viola knew what she needed on a given day and dressed accordingly. She did not think of this as color theory. She thought of it as common sense her mother had given her. Number 12. A belt cost $1 and changed the architecture of everything. A dress that read as shapeless became fitted with a belt at the natural waist. A blouse tucked into a skirt and belted became a suit. A coat belted became structured. Viola owned 5 belts in different widths. She used them the way a painter uses different brushes, each one for a different purpose, none of them interchangeable. Number 11. Mend it the same day it tears. A small tear left until tomorrow becomes a large tear by next week. Viola kept a needle and thread in every room where clothes were handled. The sewing kit by the bedroom door, the one in the hall closet, the one in her purse. A loose button was sewn on before it was lost. A pulled hem was tacked back before it was stepped on. Nothing left the house damaged because nothing was allowed to stay damaged. Number 10. The coat was the first thing they saw and the last thing they remembered. In Chicago winters, Viola was in her coat more than she was out of it. She owned one good wool coat in a neutral color that worked over everything she owned. She had it cleaned once a year and brushed once a week. She did not buy a new coat because a different silhouette appeared in the shop window. She had her coat. It was good. It stayed. Number 9. Pin the hem before you cut it. Viola never cut a hem by measuring from the floor. She put the garment on the body, had someone pin the hem while she stood straight with her weight even, and cut only after the pins said where the cut should go. A hem measured from the floor is accurate. A hem pinned on the body is right. Number 8. Shoes spoke before she did. Viola polished her shoes every Sunday night without exception. A scuff on a shoe communicated something she did not intend to communicate. The polish took 6 minutes. The impression it changed lasted their entire week. Number 7. The slip was a privacy garment and a shape garment at once. In 1954, a skirt worn without a slip was considered unfinished in the same way a face without lipstick was considered unfinished. The slip prevented the fabric from going transparent in sunlight. It prevented static from pulling the skirt against the legs. It gave the skirt the weight it needed to swing correctly when she walked. 3 functions from one 30-cent garment worn under everything. Number 6. Buy the fabric first, then decide what to make. Viola did not go to the fabric store to buy fabric for a specific dress. She went to see what was there. When she found something exceptional, a wool suiting fabric at the end of a bolt selling for 20 cents a yard, a cotton print in a color nobody else had bought, she bought it and let it wait. The right use for it would come. The fabric store on 4th Avenue closed in 1971 and nothing replaced it. Number 5. The right lipstick completed the outfit the same way a period completes a sentence. Viola kept one lipstick in her purse. 1. A deep berry that worked across her skin tone in every season. She did not leave the house without it on, and she did not touch up more than once in public. The color was chosen deliberately and never changed because it worked and because what worked did not need to be replaced. Number 4, never wear something for the first time somewhere it matters. Every new garment Viola made or bought was worn once at home before it was worn anywhere that counted. She walked in it. She sat in it. She raised her arms in it. She stood up from a chair in it. If it pulled or gaped or fell wrong when she moved, she fixed it before it went out in the world. Nothing surprised her in public because nothing had been left to chance in private. Number 3, a dress worn 3 ways is 3 dresses. The same day dress worn with a belt was office appropriate. Worn without the belt with a cardigan added, it was Saturday afternoon. Worn with the collar turned up and a brooch at the throat, it was evening. Viola did not buy more clothes to cover more occasions. She learned to make the clothes she had cover more occasions. Number 2, let the other women see you before you see yourself. Before she left the house on any important morning, Viola stood in the kitchen doorway and let her mother look. Not for approval, for accuracy. Her mother would say yes or adjust one thing. The belt moved half an inch, the collar turned down, the hat tilted 3 degrees forward. The second set of eyes was not vanity, it was quality control. Number 1, dress as if it matters because it does. This is the one that held every other trick together. Viola did not dress well because she was vain. She dressed well because she understood something that the current era has largely forgotten. In a world that was working every day to communicate that she did not matter, the way she presented herself in public was one of the few languages she was permitted to speak without interruption. During the Civil Rights era, the instruction to marchers and protesters was explicit. Dress your best. Press clothes, polish shoes, hats and gloves. Not because it made them safer. It did not make them safer. Because they understood that dignity claimed through appearance is harder to dismiss than dignity claimed through words alone. The photographs from those marches are evidence. Look at the faces. Look at the clothes. Look at what they were saying before anyone opened a mouth. Viola dressed like that every day. Not only on Sundays, not only on important mornings. Every day she left the house, she dressed as if her presence in the world was worth preparing for, because it was. The tricks on this list cost almost nothing combined. The cheapest of them was the damp cloth for lint. The most expensive was the one good coat. None of them required a subscription, a credit card, or a purchase made in 30 seconds from a phone screen. What they required was knowing what you were doing and believing it was worth doing correctly. Viola's granddaughter found her sewing box in 2004. The fabric swatches in the envelope were still there, faded but intact. She didn't know what they were for. She does now. Pick 3 things from this list. 3 you can start this week. Come back in the comments and tell me which ones. The next video is ready. Go into your closet right now and count how many pieces you own that you actually wear. Not the total, the ones you reach for. For most women, the number is somewhere between 8 and 15 out of 60 or 70 or 80 items hanging there. Now, here is the strange part. A black woman in 1955 owned a fraction of what you own, maybe 15 pieces total, and she wore almost all of them. And the pieces she owned are the exact pieces that fashion designers are quietly bringing back right now and selling to you at $400 each. That is not an exaggeration. Walk through any high-end store this season, and you are looking at a slow, deliberate revival of the 1950s black woman's wardrobe. The same silhouettes, the same construction, the same pieces her grandmother owned and wore out and replaced without ever thinking of them as fashion. They were just her clothes. Now they are the trend the industry is charging a premium for. Betting that you do not know they were standard issue 70 years ago, Here's what makes this worth 20 minutes of your time. Once you can see these pieces, once you know what they were, why they worked, and what they are called now, you will start spotting them everywhere. On the runway, in the store windows, on the women who always look expensive without ever looking like they tried. And you will understand that the most elegant wardrobe of the last century was not built on money. It was built on knowing which pieces to own. These are the pieces that vanished, and these are the ones coming back. Number 20, the tailored day dress. The single most important piece in a 1955 Black woman's closet was the tailored day dress, a fitted, structured, knee-length dress in a solid color or a small print, cut to fit her specific body and altered by a seamstress until it did. She owned several. She wore them to work, to the market, to visit, to run the household. It was not an occasion piece. It was the uniform of a woman who left the house looking finished every single day. What made it work was the fit, not the fabric. A cotton day dress that cost almost nothing, taken to the seamstress on the block and nipped at the waist and hemmed to the exact right length, read as expensive because it fit like it was made for her, because it effectively was. The tailored day dress vanished when casual wear swallowed the daytime wardrobe in the 1970s and 1980s. And it is coming back hard right now under names like the midi dress and the shirt dress revival, sold at premium prices as a discovery. It was never lost. It was standard. Number 19, the structured handbag with a frame. Not a slouchy tote, not a soft hobo bag. A structured handbag with a rigid frame, a clasp closure, and a defined shape that held its form whether it was full or empty. It matched her shoes. It was often the single most expensive item she owned, bought once and carried for years and repaired rather than replaced. The structured bag did something for a whole outfit that no soft bag can do. It added a note of formality and control, a hard, clean line that signaled a woman who had her affairs in order. It sat in the crook of the arm or hung from the forearm, never slung across the body, because it was a finishing piece, not a piece of luggage. The structured frame bag disappeared into an era of soft, shapeless, oversized bags, and it is now one of the most aggressively revived pieces in the entire luxury market. The top handle bag, the structured mini, sold for hundreds to thousands of dollars. Her grandmother's church bag is this season's status symbol. Number 18, the full circle skirt. A skirt cut in a full circle that fell to mid-calf and moved when she walked, cinched at the waist to create the hourglass line that defined the era. The circle skirt was everyday wear, cotton for daytime, richer fabrics for evening. It flattered nearly every body because it emphasized the smallest part of the waist and skimmed everything below it. The full skirt vanished when the silhouette went narrow and then went casual. And it is returning now as the full midi skirt and the circle skirt revival, photographed on every fashion feed as though it were new. It was in every Black woman's closet in 1955. Number 17, the fitted cardigan worn as a top, a close-fitting cardigan, often short-sleeved, buttoned up and worn as a top in its own right rather than as a layer thrown over something else. Frequently adorned with a small brooch at the collar or a delicate chain, the fitted cardigan was a workhorse. It dressed up a skirt, it went to the office, it went to church under a jacket. It disappeared into an era of oversized, shapeless knitwear, and it is now everywhere under the name the sweater top and the cardigan as top, styled exactly the way Black women styled it 70 years ago, brooch and all. Number 16, the tailored blazer cut for a woman's body, not a boxy men's cut jacket. A blazer nipped at the waist, shaped through the body, cut to follow a woman's actual silhouette rather than hide it. The tailored blazer was how a black woman signaled seriousness in the workplace, at a meeting, at any occasion where she needed to be taken seriously in a world already inclined to dismiss her. This piece carried a specific weight for black women in this era. In a country that read a black woman's competence and character off her appearance before she said a single word, a sharply tailored blazer was armor and argument at once. It made her harder to dismiss and easier to take seriously. And the women who understood this wore it like the professional tool it was. It vanished into decades of oversized, boxy, borrowed from menswear tailoring. And it is returning now as the fitted blazer and the hourglass jacket, sold as a fresh silhouette. She was wearing it to work in 1955, and she understood exactly what it was doing for her. Number 15, the silk headscarf. A square of silk folded and tied at the neck over the hair or knotted at the throat as the finishing accent on an outfit. The headscarf was practical, it protected a fresh set from the weather, and it was decorative, adding color and polish to the simplest outfit. The scarf carried deep roots in black women's culture, running back through the head wraps of earlier generations to the elegant silk squares of the 1950s, and black women wore it with a fluency and range that few other groups matched, at the throat over the crown, tied at the nape, knotted around the handle of the structured bag. The silk scarf vanished as a daily accessory and is now revived across every luxury house as the neck scarf and the hair silk, sold as an elevated styling trick. Black women had it knotted at the throat generations before the styling editors rediscovered it. Before number 14, I have gathered more forgotten wisdom from the 1950s all in one place. You can find it in the description below. Number 14, the swing coat. A coat that fit at the shoulders and swung out full and free below, worn over the full skirted dresses of the era. Dramatic and elegant and warm. The swing coat made an entrance. It read as luxurious even when it was inexpensively made because the silhouette itself was generous. It disappeared into decades of straight, narrow, minimal outerwear, and it is coming back now as the swing coat and the cocoon coat, photographed as a statement piece and priced accordingly. Her winter coat is this year's runway silhouette. Number 13, a low, elegant, walkable heel, 1.5 inches, maybe 2, that gave lift and polish without sacrificing the ability to stand all day, walk to the bus, and work. The kitten heel was the everyday shoe of the practical, elegant woman who was on her feet constantly and refused to look less than finished while doing it. This was the shoe of a working woman who had somewhere to be and no car to take her there. It gave her the elongated leg and lifted posture of a heel while letting her actually live her day, walk the blocks, stand the shift, chase the children without ruining her feet. The kitten heel vanished into an era of either flat shoes or towering stilettos with nothing in between, and it is now one of the most revived shoe shapes in fashion, sold as the return of the kitten heel, as though comfort and elegance in the same shoe were a new idea. It was her default because she needed both and refused to give up either. Number 12, the pearl set. A strand of pearls at the throat and a matching pair at the ears, real if she could afford them, beautifully made imitations if she could not, and the imitations were so well made that no one could tell. The pearl set was the finishing touch that turned an ordinary dress into an outfit. It was passed down, given at graduations and weddings, worn until the strand had to be restrung. The pearl set did something specific that made it worth owning even on a tight budget. It added a note of dignity and permanence to whatever it touched, reading as heirloom quality regardless of what it cost. and it flattered the face by bringing soft light up to the throat and jaw. Pearls never fully vanished, but the deliberate match set, earrings and necklace chosen to work together as a unit, faded, and it is back now, styled on every fashion feed as the pearl moment, worn by women who think they invented it. She wore hers to church every Sunday and to every occasion that mattered in between. Number 11, the wide patent leather belt. A wide belt, often patent leather, cinched at the natural waist to define the silhouette and pull an outfit together at its center. The belt was the cheapest way to transform a dress. It created the waist, it added a color accent, it turned a shapeless garment into an hourglass. The wide waist belt vanished when waistlines disappeared from fashion entirely, and it is returning now as the corset belt and the waist-defining belt, sold as a styling revelation. She had 3 of them in a drawer. Number 10, the tailored capri and cigarette pant. When a black woman in 1955 wore trousers, and increasingly she did, they were tailored, high-waisted, and cut slim to the ankle, either the cropped capri or the full-length cigarette pant. Never loose, never shapeless. Cut to flatter, worn with a fitted top and a flat or a low heel. The high waist was the entire secret of the silhouette. It sat at the natural waist, the smallest point of the torso, elongating the leg and defining the shape in a way that low-rise and loose trousers simply cannot. The slim tailored trouser vanished into decades of baggy, low-rise, and shapeless pants, and it is fully back as the high-waisted cigarette pant and the slim capri, sold as elevated basics. Audrey Hepburn gets the credit in the fashion press. Black women were wearing them just as sharply, styling them just as precisely, and getting none of the credit for it. Number 9, the shirtwaist dress. A dress built like a shirt on top, collar, button placket, cuffs with a full or fitted skirt below, belted at the waist. The shirtwaist was the most versatile dress of the era. Crisp enough for work, easy enough for home, elegant enough for most daytime occasions. It could be dressed up or down with a change of accessories. It vanished into casual wear and is now one of the most revived silhouettes in contemporary fashion. Under its original name, the shirt dress, sold season after season as a timeless essential. It was a rack staple in every black woman's closet. Number 8, the bolero and cropped jacket. A short cropped jacket that ended at or above the waist, worn over a sleeveless dress to add polish and coverage without adding bulk. The bolero let a woman wear an evening dress to church, a cocktail dress to a daytime event. It changed the formality of an outfit instantly. It vanished almost completely and is now returning as the cropped jacket and the bolero revival, styled over slip dresses exactly the way black women styled it over their sheets. A single piece that doubled the wearability of everything underneath it. Number 7, the full slip. Underneath every dress was a full slip, a fitted underlayer that smoothed the body, eliminated the friction that distorts drape, and gave the outer garment a clean surface to fall against. The slip was not lingerie in the modern sense. It was structural. It was the reason her dresses fell the way they fell. This is the piece whose disappearance explains more about why modern clothes hang badly than any other single item. A dress worn directly over bare skin or hosiery drags, clings, and bunches. The same dress worn over a slip glides and settles into the line it was designed to hold. The slip vanished when synthetic linings replaced it, and the knowledge of why it mattered disappeared with it. And it is back now, both as visible outerwear in the slip dress trend and quietly as the shapewear layer that women are rediscovering makes their clothes hang correctly. She never wore a dress without one, and her dresses never betrayed her the way modern dresses betray the women who skip it. Number 6, the matching glove. Gloves, short for day, long for evening, in kid leather, cotton, or lace that completed an outfit and were considered as essential as shoes for a properly dressed woman well into the 1960s. The glove was the mark of a finished look, chosen in a specific shade to complete the picture. Gloves vanished from everyday wear almost entirely, and they are creeping back through high fashion and red carpet styling as the opera glove and the statement glove sold as drama. For her, they were not drama, they were Tuesday. Number 5, the pillbox and structured hat. A hat was not optional for a well-dressed black woman in this era, and the church hat in particular was a category of art in itself. The structured pillbox, the small tilted cap, the wide brim for summer. Each was chosen to frame the face and complete the outfit, made by black milliners who understood exactly how to build a hat for a black woman's features. The church hat especially became a form of personal expression and communal pride so distinctive that it has its own name, the crown, and its own deep tradition in black church culture, where a woman's Sunday hat was a statement of dignity, artistry, and self-respect made in the most public weekly gathering of her community. The hat vanished from daily life as the culture went bareheaded, and structured hats are now returning through luxury fashion as statement accessories. The crown of the outfit, gone for decades, coming back to the runway, though the runway rarely credits where the artistry came from. Number 4, the A-line sheath dress. A clean, simple, fitted dress that skimmed the body in a soft A-line, no ornamentation, no fuss, just perfect cut and perfect fit. The sheath was the most elegant piece a woman could own precisely because it relied entirely on fit and proportion rather than decoration. It went from office to dinner with a change of jewelry. The sheath never fully disappeared, but the emphasis on impeccable fit that made it work was lost. And it is being sold again now as the column dress and the minimalist sheath, photographed as the height of quiet luxury. Her version was tailored to the millimeter by a woman on her block. Number 3, the brooch. A pin worn at the shoulder, the collar, the lapel or the waist, the detail that personalized an outfit and signaled taste. The brooch was often the only ornamentation on an otherwise simple ensemble, and its placement was a small art. Brooches were inherited, collected, given as gifts, and worn with intention. The genius of the brooch was economic as much as aesthetic. A single, well-placed pin could transform the same plain dress into a dozen different looks depending on where it sat and what it was, which meant a woman with a small wardrobe and a handful of brooches had a range of appearances far larger than her closet suggested. The brooch vanished so completely that a generation grew up not knowing where to put one, and it is now returning across fashion as the statement pin, styled on lapels and collars exactly where she wore hers. The smallest piece on this list and one of the most missed. Number 2, the car coat and topper. A short, structured coat that ended at the hip or mid-thigh, worn over dresses and separates, polished and practical and endlessly versatile. The car coat bridged the gap between a heavy winter coat and no coat at all. It was the piece for the in-between weather that makes up most of the year. It vanished into an era of either massive puffers or no outerwear structure at all, and it is returning now as the car coat revival and the short trench, sold as an elevated transitional piece. She owned one in a neutral that went with everything, because that was the efficient way to build a wardrobe. Number 1, the wardrobe that was small, coordinated, and completely understood. This is the one that made every other piece on this list work. The real vanished item is not any single garment. It is the philosophy that organized all of them. A black woman in 1955 owned a small wardrobe, a dozen or 15 key pieces, and every one of them was chosen deliberately, coordinated with the others, fitted to her body, and understood completely. She knew what went with what. She knew what each piece did. She could get dressed in 7 minutes and walk out looking flawless because there were no wrong combinations in her closet. Everything worked with everything because she had built it that way on purpose. This is the exact opposite of how the modern wardrobe is built. The modern closet is large, chaotic, and mostly unworn. 70 pieces bought impulsively, uncoordinated, ill-fitting, with nothing quite going with anything else. Which is why a woman with a full closet stands in front of it every morning and says she has nothing to wear. She is not wrong. She has 70 pieces and no wardrobe. The 1955 woman had 15 pieces and a complete wardrobe, because a wardrobe is not a quantity of clothing. It is a coordinated system, and the system is what vanished. Here's why all of these pieces are coming back at once. The fashion industry has run out of genuinely new ideas and has turned to the most elegant wardrobe of the 20th century to mine for revivals. And that wardrobe, the one being quietly resurrected piece by piece and sold back at a premium, is the one black women were wearing in 1955. The tailored day dress, the structured bag, the full skirt, the fitted blazer, the kitten heel, the pearl set, the slip, the gloves, the brooch. Every one of them is returning because every one of them was right the first time. You do not have to wait for the industry to sell these pieces back to you at $400 each. You can understand the philosophy right now. Buy less. Buy pieces that fit your body. Make sure everything coordinates, and own a wardrobe you understand completely instead of a closet you are drowning in. That is the whole secret. That is what she knew. And it never actually vanished. It was just waiting in the photographs for someone to look closely enough to see it. Pick one piece from this list, find it or find its modern version, and build one perfect outfit around it this week. Come back in the comments and tell me which piece you chose. The next video is ready.
There's a photograph of a black woman in 1955 walking out of a church in Baltimore on an ordinary Sunday morning. She is not a celebrity. She is not a model. She is a school teacher or a secretary at a black-owned insurance company or somebody's aunt on her way home to fix dinner. She is wearing a plain sheath dress that cost her almost nothing. Black pumps, pearl earrings. That is the whole outfit. And she looks better than what most women will look at any point this year, no matter how much they spend. That statement is not exaggeration. Study any photograph of an ordinary black woman from 1955 and put it next to any photograph of an ordinary black woman today, and the 1955 woman will win every single time, despite the fact that she is dressed in a fraction of the clothing at a fraction of the price with zero of the beauty products currently marketed as essential. She is not winning because her clothes are more expensive. She is winning because she knew something that has almost entirely disappeared. She knew that elegance is not a look, it is a system. And the system produces the same result on any woman who applies it, regardless of budget, regardless of body, regardless of the era she is dressing for. The black women who mastered this system in the 1950s did not have the resources most people associate with elegance. They earned lower wages than white women doing the same work. They were turned away from the fitting rooms of the best department stores. The mainstream fashion industry did not design for their bodies, did not market to their communities, and did not photograph them for its aspirational imagery. They built elegance anyway, in beauty parlors on Saturday afternoons, in the pages of Ebony and Jet, in the churches where Sunday morning was the biggest weekly gathering of Black women in every American city, in the seamstress shops that lined every Black commercial street in every migration city. Zelda Wynne Valdez was designing gowns for Ella Fitzgerald and Dorothy Dandridge. Starting in 1948, decades before mainstream American fashion cared to dress Black women, and her techniques were traveling through Black women's clothing networks the entire time. Then the infrastructure that transmitted the system broke down. The seamstresses closed, the Black-owned shops closed. The mothers stopped teaching their daughters the small daily habits, and the daughters grew up believing fashion was what they saw on television instead of what their grandmothers had known. This video is that knowledge. Every principle here works with the clothes already hanging in your closet. You do not need a new wardrobe. You need what the woman walking out of that Baltimore church at 9 in the morning knew before she was 20. This is the system. Number 8. The color palette was small, deliberate, and repeated. A Black woman in 1955 who understood elegance did not own 30 different colors in her wardrobe. She owned 4, maybe 5. Navy, ivory, a specific shade of red that suited her, camel or a warm brown that worked with her skin, black, obviously. And every piece she bought was in one of these colors, which meant every piece she owned coordinated with every other piece she owned, which meant every morning she was choosing between combinations that were already guaranteed to work. This was not a limitation. It was a strategy. A wardrobe built on 4 colors and 1 accent color produces more successful outfits than a wardrobe built on 20 colors because the coordination has already been solved at the level of acquisition rather than being renegotiated every morning at the closet. This principle was passed down explicitly in Black women's magazines and in the fashion columns that appeared in Ebony throughout the 1950s and 1960s. The columnists, Frida De Knight, Toki Schalk Johnson, and others repeatedly instructed Black women to choose their palette first, then buy accordingly, and to trust that a limited palette produced more elegant outcomes than a broad one. This was not a compromise for women of limited means. This was, and remains, the operational logic of the world's best-dressed women in every era. The modern fashion industry has monetized the opposite of this principle. Fast fashion depends on introducing new colors every season to trigger purchase. Personal shopping services depend on convincing clients that they need broader color coverage than they actually do. The industry is worth hundreds of billions of dollars because it has successfully persuaded women to abandon the disciplined palette in favor of the impulse purchase. The women in the 1955 photographs never had that problem. They knew their 4 colors, they bought their 4 colors, and they looked exactly right every single day. Number 7. Every hem, every seam, every fit was adjusted before the garment was worn. Before number 7, I have documented more forgotten things 1950s Black women did that modern women don't do today. It is in the description below. The seamstress on the block in every Black neighborhood in every 1955 American city was not a luxury service. She was infrastructure. Every dress that came into a Black woman's closet, whether it was purchased at a store, bought on approval from a catalog sewn by a friend, or received as a hand-me-down from an older sister, was assessed for fit before it was worn. If the hem was wrong, it went to the seamstress. If the shoulders were too broad, it went to the seamstress. If the waist needed to come in, it went to the seamstress. The result was that every garment in her wardrobe fit her body specifically, rather than fitting the size chart that had produced the garment. And a garment that fits a specific body reads as expensive regardless of what it cost. A garment that does not fit reads as inexpensive regardless of what it cost. This is the single most important principle in the entire architecture of elegance, and it was operational knowledge in Black communities in 1955 because access to alterations was cheap, geographically close, and culturally understood as a normal part of wardrobe maintenance. The modern American woman spends more on clothing than any woman in history and looks worse in it than most previous generations because she buys off the rack, does not alter, and treats the size the tag says as though it were a description of her body rather than a description of a range. The Black seamstresses of the 1950s were operating a form of custom tailoring at drugstore prices for women who understood that no garment came out of a package ready to wear. It had to be finished, and the finishing was where elegance actually happened. Number 6. The undergarments were doing the shape work, not the outer garment. A dress in 1955 did not have to compensate for an unstructured foundation because the foundation was already doing its job before the dress went on. The correctly fitted brassiere, the light girdle, the slip, the stockings anchored to a garter belt or a girdle. Every one of these garments was performing a specific mechanical function, and their combined effect was that the outer garment could be simple, a plain sheath, a shirt waist, an unornamented blouse, because the outer garment did not have to work. The line was already there, the shape was already there, the dress fell over an architected surface, and it fell exactly as it had been designed to fall. This is the single most misunderstood aspect of 1950s fashion, and it explains almost everything that is baffling about modern efforts to reproduce the look. Women today try to recreate the silhouettes of 1955 by buying elaborate dresses and adding shapewear afterward. This inverts the order of operations. The 1955 woman built the shape first with foundation garments and then chose a dress that was simple enough to display it. Her elegance was not in her dress. Her elegance was underneath it. Sarah Blakely founded Spanx in 2000 after realizing that women had lost the foundation garment infrastructure. She built a billion-dollar company by selling back a fraction of what the 1955 shape system was doing for a fraction of the price. The system worked. It always worked. It only stopped being widespread when the mothers stopped teaching the daughters why the slip was in the drawer to begin with. Number 5. Accessories were the variable, and the accessories were coordinated. The dresses in a 1955 Black woman's wardrobe were the constants. The accessories were the variables. A woman who owned 6 dresses and rotated her scarves, brooches, belts, gloves, hats, and shoes deliberately could produce the appearance of a wardrobe 3 times its actual size, which is exactly what she did. The mathematics were understood, but the coordination was more than a math problem. The accessories were chosen deliberately in relation to the outfit's palette, occasion, and effect. The scarf, tied at the neck of a plain blouse, was chosen to bring one specific detail to attention. The brooch pinned to the lapel was chosen to sit at exactly the right height. The gloves, a staple of Black women's Sunday wear well into the 1970s, were selected in a specific shade of ivory or bone or black to complete the picture without becoming the picture. Zelda Wynne Valdez and other Black designers of this era taught this explicitly to their clients. Ella Fitzgerald's stage wardrobe was famously simple in its dresses and precise in its accessories because Valdez understood that the eye should be drawn to the woman wearing the clothes and not to any one item she was wearing. This is the essence of elegance. Nothing shouts. Every detail supports. The hat itself was a specific category of expertise in Black women's fashion in this era. The Sunday hat, with its crown, wide-brimmed statement, and small tilted cap with a veil, was not decoration. It was frame. It positioned the face at a specific height, cast the light on the features in a specific way, and communicated a specific level of formality that the rest of the outfit was calibrated to. Black milliners in Harlem, Chicago, and Detroit ran businesses that produced hats specifically designed for Black women's proportions and features, and those hats disappeared from the culture almost entirely by the 1980s. Not because the taste changed, but because the businesses closed and the transmission stopped. The glove was doing similar work. Long gloves for evening, short gloves for day, kid leather for cold weather, thin cotton for summer. Each glove length and material had a specific place in the accessory grammar. And every Black woman raised in this system knew which glove belonged with which occasion, the way a chef knows which knife belongs with which cut of meat. The modern accessory market, worth over $500 billion globally, sells individual pieces disconnected from any coherent system. The pieces do not coordinate because they were not chosen to coordinate. The result is a wardrobe of accessories that produce less visual impact than a coordinated set 1/3 the size. The 1955 Black woman's accessory drawer was the smaller set. Her impact was the larger one. Number 4, the proportions were mathematical, and the woman understood her own proportions completely. A Black woman in 1955 who dressed well knew her body the way a tailor knows a body. She knew the length her skirts had to be proportional to her leg. She knew where her waist actually sat, which is not always where the manufacturer of a dress assumed it sat. She knew that her sleeves needed to end at a specific point on her arm to make her shoulders look their best, and she knew that a neckline higher than a certain point on her chest was flattering, while a neckline lower was not. This body-specific knowledge was passed from mother to daughter in a manner that has largely disappeared. Mothers took their daughters to the seamstress at 17. Older women in the family gave assessments, sometimes brutally honest ones, of what worked on the young woman's body and what did not. The beauty parlor was a place where the older women corrected the younger ones, quietly, kindly, but firmly, when they were about to buy a garment that would not suit them. The specific vocabulary was learned early. The A-line skirt for the woman with a smaller waist and rounder hips. The pencil skirt for the woman with a straighter frame. The empire waist for one silhouette. The dropped waist for another. The V neckline that lengthened a shorter neck. The scoop that softened a sharper jaw. The bracelet length sleeve that elongated the arm. The 3/4 sleeve that shortened it. Every one of these principles was operational knowledge in Black women's fashion communities, and the woman who mastered them by 20 had a lifetime of correct choices ahead of her. The result was that a Black woman in 1955 knew without hesitation which cuts flattered her, which colors brightened her face, which fabrics moved well on her frame. She could shop in 15 minutes because she was not exploring possibilities. She was looking for what she already knew worked. The modern woman shops for hours because she has not been taught this system, and she does not know her body's proportions in the technical sense in which the woman of 1955 knew hers. There is a specific term for the modern condition of shopping without this framework. It is called decision fatigue, and psychologists have documented that it produces measurably worse purchase outcomes, lower satisfaction with purchases made, and a higher rate of return and repurchase. The 1955 Black woman did not experience decision fatigue in her shopping because her decisions had largely been pre-made. She knew what she was looking for. She found it, or she did not. She did not agonize. Number 3, the occasion determined the outfit, and every occasion had a specific dress code that everyone in the community understood. Church was one thing, a cocktail party was another. A workplace at a Black-owned business was a third. A civil rights meeting and Black women in 1955 were attending them in large numbers required a specific kind of dignified, uncompromising professional appearance that would communicate the seriousness of the cause the moment the woman walked into the room. Every occasion had a code, and every Black woman raised in this world understood the codes. Sunday morning at a Black Baptist or AME church required the full presentation: a hat, gloves, a coordinated dress, a slip beneath it, hose, closed-toe pumps, a handbag that matched the shoes. A weekday visit to the same church for a women's committee meeting required half that. A hat was optional, gloves were not usually worn. The dress could be simpler. A cocktail party in a private home required an entirely different register. Cocktail dress, evening bag, dressier heels, a wrap for the cool part of the evening. A funeral required its own specific code. Dark colors, more coverage than usual, a hat with a small veil for the widow and close relatives, understated jewelry, no perfume that would compete with the flowers. This meant that dressed appropriately for an occasion was never a question of taste or personal expression in the modern sense. It was a question of correct execution. If you were going to church, you dressed for church. If you were going to a wedding, you dressed for a wedding. If you were going to work, you dressed for that specific workplace. The rules were clear, the community enforced them, and the result was that Black women in 1955 were consistently, appropriately, and elegantly dressed for every situation they entered. The modern erosion of dress codes is often celebrated as a form of liberation. In some ways it is, but it has also removed the guiding framework that made elegance broadly accessible. When there is no rule for how to dress for a wedding, every woman must independently invent an answer, which most of them do imperfectly, which is why weddings today are the visual chaos they often are. The 1955 Black woman had the rule. She followed it. She looked correct. And correct, executed with a limited palette and a fitted garment, is nearly indistinguishable from elegant. Number 2, she never underdressed for an occasion, and she never overdressed either. There is a specific error that betrays every attempt at elegance more reliably than any other, and it is the error of miscalibrated formality. Wearing something too casual for the room signals disrespect or indifference. Wearing something too formal for the room signals that the wearer has misjudged the occasion or is trying too hard. Either mistake breaks the impression of elegance instantly. The Black women in the 1955 photographs almost never made this mistake, and the reason is that they had been trained from adolescence to read the level of formality a room required and to dress precisely to it. Not one level below, not one level above, exactly to it. This calibration was practiced constantly, discussed openly in Black women's magazines, and reinforced by every older woman in the community who saw a younger woman make the error. Calibration cannot be taught by a rule. It has to be taught by example, over years, by women who have already mastered it. The break in the transmission of this skill is one of the reasons the modern room is often such a visual mess. The guests have all arrived at different levels of formality, no one dressed correctly for the occasion, and the whole social event begins on a foundation of miscalibration. The 1955 Black woman did not make this mistake. She had been taught and she had absorbed the teaching. Number 1, she understood at the deepest level that elegance was a form of self-respect and a form of communal pride, and she carried herself accordingly. This is the one that held every other rule together. A Black woman in 1955 America who left the house dressed with care was making a statement, whether she articulated it or not, about her own worth and about the worth of the community she represented. In a country that told her in 1,000 ways every day that she was worth less than the women around her, less pay, less protection, less courtesy, less recognition. The decision to appear in public in a state of complete personal composure was a form of resistance. It said, without saying anything, that whatever the country outside had decided about her, she had decided otherwise about herself. This was not vanity. It was closer to sacred. Black women dressing beautifully for church on Sunday morning were doing something that had nothing to do with fashion in the shallow sense. They were declaring in front of God and each other that they were made in the image of something precious, that their worth was not up for negotiation, and that they would not be arriving anywhere less than perfectly presented as long as they had any say in the matter. The civil rights movement understood this. The women who marched, sat in, and stood at lunch counters wore their finest clothes deliberately, with the pressed dress, the coordinated accessories, the polished shoes, the correctly fitted foundation. They understood that the dignity they projected through their appearance was a form of argument that could not be interrupted. You could refuse to hear them speak. You could not refuse to see how they had presented themselves. Every photograph of Black women in that era who were making history is also a photograph of Black women in a state of complete personal elegance. And that is not a coincidence. It is the point. The women in every single one of these 1955 photographs, the church member in Baltimore, the office worker in Chicago, the student at Fisk, the guest at the Harlem cocktail party, was operating on this premise. Her clothes fit, her palette was coordinated, her foundation was correct, her accessories were deliberate, her calibration was exact, and underneath all of it, she believed with an intensity that changed how she moved through every room, that she was worth every ounce of effort she was putting into presenting herself. The premise was portable. It still is. Every piece of clothing in your closet today can be worn according to these rules. Every principle here works with what you already own. You do not need a new wardrobe. You need the framework the women in those 1955 photographs were using, and the belief about your own worth that made the framework matter. Pick one rule from this list. Apply it this week. Come back in the comments and tell me what changed. The next video is ready.